welcome once again to Rise of the GM, where today we're going to be talking about the encounter where you seek a sword. We're going to be talking about an avaricious merchant, and Eric Bright is joining us to talk about the game system Starforged, right here on Rise of the GM. Well, hey guys, here we are. Again, it is now February, and the state of Illinois can't decide if it's warm or cold. We had 66 degrees the other day. We have 26 tonight, or 23 or something like that.
Yep.
But we're continuing to trod on towards spring. And I don't care what Punxsutawney Phil says, we're going to get there.
We did the same thing down here. We actually had snow days in Georgia. And then this week my classroom was up to 83. So, I mean, it's, so we hit spring hard.
That's a wider range than we have here.
Yes.
Ours is just lower, like a week or so, I guess a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago. Never mind. We're going all the way back months now. Never mind. We had some like negative, some highs and then negatives here when we first started this semester. And it just, that to 60 is probably the same spread. We're just lower.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we got Eric with us here today, who's been
Welcome
with us
back.
a couple times before, and
Happy to
we're
be here.
going to be talking about some fun stuff today with him. But before we do, we are going to get to our encounter starter. We always start with an encounter to give you guys some ideas, some brainstorms.
And just for everybody out there, this will be fun too. I know Matthew said before we get to the fun stuff, but the encounter will be fun too. So
The
stick
encounter
with us.
might be fun. Let's just see.
Okay, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, this one should be fun. There's been ones I've read and I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I would use that, but I think this one should be good. This one is called A Race with Two Finish Lines, and I'll read it, and then we'll all kind of pitch in what we think we would do with something of this sort of encounter. Two heirs are positioned to inherit a small kingdom, but it's uncertain which of them will actually get it. There is, however, a sword symbolizing the royal family that would seriously tip the balance in favor of its owner, and both heirs have contracted parties of adventurers to procure it or to get it for them from a long-abandoned keep from which their family used to rule. So while the general location of the keep is known, its exact location isn't, that's the first thing that seemed kind of weird to me. It's like, okay, this was your family. You don't know where it's at, but the exact location isn't. The surrounding countryside is difficult terrain. So the party will likely have to get directions from locals or hire a guide once they arrive. If they're behind their competitors, it's possible that anyone they get information from is one of the competitors and has been bribed to mislead them. So the keep has been taken over by, it says intelligent humanoid inhabitants, but then later it calls them monsters. So yeah, take that wherever you want and whatever that looks like for you. And they have these intelligent humanoid inhabitants have repaired the old drawbridge and portcullis. So I imagine they've lifted the bridge and dropped the portcullis, so it's hard to get in at the main gate. So getting in will require outwitting them or finding an alternate route to get in. The sword itself was being held by the lord of the keep when he fell in battle somewhere inside against these monsters. And so it's currently in the hands of the biggest, meanest monster in the keep, of course. After the sword is retrieved, the opposing group will lay an ambush and even endanger civilian targets, such as those at the inn where the PCs are resting, in order to take the sword from them. And so that's the adventure in a nutshell. And what would you guys do with something like this? There's two heirs, two brothers, I don't know, going after this sword. One of them hires your group and another one hires another group. So we got that whole competition against adventuring parties. Again, this is like the third time in a short span. What would you guys do with something like this?
Well, I'm going to jump in if I can.
Yeah, go for it.
I think there's a lot left that needs to be fleshed out here, really, because if these are two brothers and they're in a competition to be heirs, then first of all they'd probably have to be twins, or else one would definitely be an heir in the first place.
Right.
And if not, then the younger one's not trying to get the sword necessarily. The younger one's trying to kill the older one so that then they become the heir, right? So the first thing I would do is completely scrap the second adventuring party being hired, because I don't think that that is necessary to kind of give you the tension that you need for this, because I think that the tension is more in the story of the relationship between the two brothers and what that looks like. And then, as you said too, the how do you not know where your castle is? You got to go ask the locals down the road. You're like, I don't know
Have you
where my
heard of this
castle
place?
is, but Joe the farmer does down there. Go talk to him. Like that doesn't make sense at all. So you're gonna have to come up with something that what happened when this lord died, right? Well, when was this battle? And I think that's crucial to the story you want to tell, which is because if that battle happened 100 years ago, okay, now what you've got is you've got this cool opportunity for, okay, somebody thinks that they're the heir, the trees and the evil forests have encroached, and that's why they don't know. Nobody actually knows where this is. So you've got to go find it, right? And lo and behold, when you get there, the biggest, baddest, meanest monster that has it is actually a third generation heir of the Lord, because it wasn't just the Lord who died; it was actually the eldest in line for the throne at that time who had died. And then he became raised by the monsters, and then his son was raised by the monsters, right? And it kept going, and now the son or daughter has actually become in charge, right? The third generation, fourth generation, in charge of these monsters, and says, these monsters cared for me and mine when everybody else left. And now you're going to come here and try and take this sword from me? There's no way, right? And now I think you got some like crazy tension there. Or you could put it currently, right? You put it now, the battle just happened recently, and another brother is still left alive who they thought was dead there too, which I think, so I think having that other family member as a connection there in the castle somehow provides some more tension and more story, more narrative, rather than just a, hey, go to that castle and hack and slash, which if that's what you want to do is like a first adventure, that's great, right? But I think probably by the time you get to the point where you're like, man, I want to tell a story, I want to drop something in, you're going to need more narrative juices flowing through this to really make it pop.
So if there's a third brother, is he born of a female monster that this guy fell in love with, and he was actually the oldest, and it was before he met the woman who had these two boys, and so now he's like a monster. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you sure turned this on its head from what it was. That's for sure.
I thought
See, that's exactly the thing that as GM you need to feel the freedom to do. Any of these, there's something that gets your juices rolling, and then you go where it feels right for you, and that can be very different from what was written. And that's the beauty of making encounters from a book work for you in your campaign or your one shot or whatever it is.
For sure. I thought this was a really good opportunity for like the hex crawl idea, or just like a deeper exploration like adventure too, with that little thing about like they know it's this direction and it's somewhere out there, but we don't really know exactly where. Kind of opens that up, so you can if you're wanting to play that style of game where it's like, hey, we're gonna like go piece by piece and scour this forest until we find this, we're gonna ask questions and stuff. I thought that could be a helpful like kicker for that, to begin something like that. So if also like if you did stick with the kind of racing against another adventuring party, I actually was starting to think about like we used to play like the Halo capture the flag all the time, and that's a much smaller scale. But I was thinking about, oh man, like trying to get to the place and get the thing and get it back, like that could change the way. If I'm thinking in that terms, that would be a very different kind of encounter / adventure also, where it's like very tense because of the like you just keep not being able to go forward to get it back to the base that you're trying to get it to. But like paying attention to the time again, if you're going to go in a direction of, okay, there's two adventuring parties out there racing for this, there is a matter of like, okay, let's not just be like arbitrary and just assume, oh, they're going to get there first, or there's no way they're going to get there first, but actually like allow for some variables of, if you get hung up on this thing, or if a roll goes poorly or something, you actually are slowed down. Or if something happens that like would help you, you can get ahead of them, and like to actually let that be a variable, not just like, now this is predetermined no matter what you do thing. So I think like paying attention to that is a really important piece of that too.
Yeah, I would say at this point in gaming technology, there's no reason to play an RPG without a clock of some kind, right? So now that we know that clocks work really well since Blades in the Dark or wherever it was introduced, like throw that in any game, and that can help you tick the tension as you see it, and help build that tension for your players as well because they see it ticking, right?
And I like the combination of what you guys are talking about. I like the idea of competing against another adventuring party because these two brothers both found out about this, and you'd have to figure out how they both found out about it now, especially if it was like 100 years ago battle, right? How did they just now find out about it? But they do. Maybe this book was found, and in it lists this place, and it says of the line of this, and they're both like, that's us. I'm the heir. I'd probably make them twins. So it's really up in the air. They can't remember who came out first and who had the heel, any of that. And so they send you out. But when you get there, you find out that the older brother monster is actually the most honorable of the three. And these two are both like just greedy as all get out. And suddenly your party has to like decide, how are we now going to like help this brother against those two who maybe keep sending parties or something. So, yeah.
Love it. Yeah, I like that idea of you want to be on the side of the person that it's hard to be on the side of, type of thing.
Yeah.
Like we the monster man deserves to be king or whatever, and that's hard to pull off. Like, how are you going to convince the population of that? That goes in a whole new direction. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is. The seeking of a sword. Do you have something else, Adam?
Yeah, I want to toss one more thing in. I think there's probably, okay, so if I'm a player in a party that's been hired to go get a sword from a place, like I'm guessing there's going to be obstacles. That's like part of the meta that like I'm not going in with eyes feeling like, oh yeah, we're just going to walk in and grab this, because that would probably be pretty lame. But I do think like there's something to say about hinting that the place is populated. Like, rather than, I think there's something within the story too of, it's like, oh, you come across some kind of hunter out in the woods, and they're like, oh, you're going up to the castle there. Well, that's been populated for years. Be careful as you go. It's like you like giving something, or just even hints of, oh, this road seems like it's like been driven on with a wagon pretty recently. Like, I think that's a good thing, so that your group comes in with some ideas about what to do, even of like, oh, we're thinking about this already, that we may need to talk our way through this, or fight, or whatever it is. So I like to give hints and not just like leave that, suddenly it's like, oh, now you have people.
Or as you're going up there, the guy's like, oh, that place like has been flooded. It's half sunk, whatever. And you get up there and you find out that the Nagas have taken over. And actually the king is actually half Naga, half person. He has this human body grown out of a Naga snake body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, really make it monstrous. So it's like, oh man, so this is the guy we're putting forward as mayor of this place. Okay. He seems cool. Narcissus, you're it, or whatever his name is.
Yeah.
You're the one.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you almost have to put that layer of extra thought on it if they're intelligent, creatures.
Right.
Like you're not just going to go in and start like, hey, I'm here to murder you. Like, well, maybe parties are, but I mean, but hopefully there's a little bit of if this is not just a straight senseless monster, then hopefully they're putting a little bit of thought into what is right and what is wrong.
Right.
Barry says they should have called it Two Princes. That was a song by Spin Doctors back in the 90s. Is that right? Two Princes?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
My daughter's
that
been trying to
reference.
learn to play that. So.
Oh, really?
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of playing, you said Halo. We just did Rockets on Blood Gulch the other night. All four of us, me and Amanda and the two kids, and like they loved it. They schooled us actually. I couldn't remember the controls. Like, this is nothing like Guild Wars.
That's pretty much whatever happens when I play with kids. They school me. I used to think I was good at video games, and I played with kids, and they like, we live digitally native, get out of our land.
Yeah. It's just like, look at you and flick you off their shoulder.
Nice.
All right. Well, hey, we have Eric on here today because we have him coming on to talk about, he came on before and talked about a game called Iron Sworn, which is a game that sounds incredible to me. And I still have not got to play it one day. But he is now coming on to talk about what would you call it?
I guess it's like a follow-up. I mean, it's almost like 1.5. So Iron Sworn is still officially in the title. It's Iron Sworn Starforged. So it's like the sci-fi version of Iron Sworn.
Okay.
Yeah, cool.
So we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to let kind of Adam lead this discussion, ask him questions. We're really going to let Eric lead this discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
He has all the answers, but we're going to ask questions, and we're going to throw stuff in here and there. But Adam,
yeah,
Starforged.
Sure. So that was in episode 31 when we talked about Iron Sworn. We're in 68 today, which is crazy to me and awesome. So super jazzed about that. But yeah, it's been a bit. And probably do like a little bit of refresh, if maybe somebody's new coming in, or if it's been a while. That's been a lot of weeks. So but yeah, we're playing right now. Eric and me and Evan are playing a game of Starforged, and it's been super fun. And as kind of Eric, like just that idea, again, for people listening, just mechanically, you want to kind of like lay out like just the general idea about how you run that?
Yeah. So there are 5 stats that are okay. Let me see: edge, heart, iron, will, and shadow. Okay, and so each of those, kind of iron is your strength, but also kind of your grit, maybe, right? So iron can even affect when you're trying to recover from a wound because you just are tough about it, right? Edge is moving quickly, but also your accuracy type stuff. Shadows, stealthy, deception. Wits is more your smarts, your head smarts, and can be used for magic things. At least in Iron Sworn, it was. And then heart is more your kind of charisma, your relationship to people, and maybe courage might fall into
courage
that as well. Okay, so those are your 5 stats. They generally run from 1 to 3. So 1 would be a low stat, 3 would be a high stat. And the base mechanic, which I just absolutely adore and love, is called an action roll, where you roll 1d6 and add your stat bonus and any circumstantial bonuses that you might have, and you compare it to 2d10s separately. Okay, and so if I roll my d6 plus a stat and it ends up as a 7, then I'm going to look at the 2 d10s, and maybe one is a 9 and one is a 5. So I beat one of the d10s, but not the other one. So there are 3 levels then of success built into that, where you can not beat either of the d10s, and so that's called a miss in this game. You could beat one of them. That's called a weak hit, which means kind of you're partially successful, but some things are probably still going to go wrong. Or you could beat both of them, which is called a strong hit. Right? So that means basically things are going to go your way, and you're going to build up some momentum, probably, which is actually a currency that I'll talk about here in a second. But that's the general idea, and then you can get kind of extra special versions of those when the d10s match. So you can have a strong hit with a match, or you can have a miss with a match, which is basically your yes and your no and. So like, if you got a miss with a match, not only did you completely fumble it, but also, the dragon that you thought you had slain comes back to life as a lich dragon and happens to show up at this very moment. Like it is, things get real bad real fast.
Yeah, right.
With a miss with a match. And so you're doing those things and you make moves. So the idea is it's narrative first. And so you're telling a story and you decide what it is that your character is going to do. And then based off of what you say you want your character to do, the GM, or if you're playing GM-less, which is kind of how we're doing right now, you kind of decide what move fits this. And there are sets of moves for combat, for adventure. One of the ones that you use a lot is like face danger, right? So if you're facing a threat, then how you face that threat, head on, or you're trying to get around it, that decides what stat you would use to go with your action roll. And then each move lays out, okay, if you get a miss, this is what happens. If you get a weak hit, this is what happens. If you get a strong hit, this is what happens. And a lot of them are similar in nature, but there are some nuanced differences between them. And they did add several new kind of moves and codified some of the things that were happening in Ironsworn naturally that they ended up putting into Starforged. So Starforged is kind of like 1.5, right? The version
Right.
of Ironsworn. And so the list of moves is a little bit longer, and I think it's handy to have it right with you if you're going to play to look at. But in the best of worlds, what you would do is describe the game or the gameplay, describe what's happening in the story, and then go to the moves.
Right.
A lot of
Right.
times, I find myself going, "Well, I'm going to use this move," and that kind of pulls some oomph out of the story. And so, anybody who's wanting to tackle this, it really is a narrative first.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. It really is cool to to have that inform the move, and it's like, well, what are you wanting to do here? We talked about that, I think, probably with Ironsworn too. I think about that with like the Sentinels RPG is a similar thing for me, where it's like I want people to say, this is what I'm wanting to do. I want to fly across the battlefield and punch the guy or whatever, and it's like, okay, cool, that sounds like this is how it goes. And I like that when that's led into that with Starforged, Ironsworn. You kind of were going in that direction, but like as far as like if we look back at the Ironsworn talk, are there like unique to Starforged pieces that these things he's added, like that you would kind of identify?
Yeah, so there are a few in the original Ironsworn and in Starforged. There are these things called assets that are cards, right? So like here's the the card deck, which is fairly thick for assets that are available for Starforged, but they changed assets completely. So or not completely, but they got rid of one category completely. So in Ironsworn, you had combat assets, which were really like weapons that you specialized in. And that's no longer the case. They went away from that, and so in space, instead of having like a sniper rifle laser thing, right? It's more that you are a sniper. That is part of your character. That
Okay.
is part of your training, and so it's not that you have this weapon. It's that this is who you are. And I think that that's a little bit of kind of the direction that they tried to go, a little bit more with Starforged, and some of them were just tweaks and balances like secure an advantage, you get a +1 momentum and a +1 to your roll, where in Ironsworn, it was just one or the other, right? And so some of them were just little tweaks like that. But some of the moves that they added included beginning and ending session moves, where one of the beginning session moves that I kind of like is doing a recap or doing a vignette at the beginning, which I think we did last time, right? We did a vignette with the villains,
Oh yeah, that's
and
right. That's right.
and when we did that, that actually gave us momentum as
Right.
characters because we were just filling out the story more, right? And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
again, you're rewarded for the story, for the narrative.
Mhm.
And that's the type of mechanics that you really want to see in a game, is that mechanics loop should reinforce the game, that is, that should reinforce the behavior that you want players to have in your game. And so um, I feel like the new moves that they added at the beginning, at the end, and some of those things really help focus players in on, hey, this is about the story. We're going to reward you for the story, right?
Mhm.
Not for uh, flanking and stuff like that, right? It's
Right.
more
Yeah.
about the story that you want to tell together. Momentum is largely the same between. I know I mentioned that a couple times, so let me just, for the audience, quick recap. Momentum
Right.
is something that you build as you go. Throughout the game, you can get +1, and you can stack it up to 10. And at any time, you can burn all of your momentum. And what that means is you take your action die score and replace it with your current momentum score. So if I can get up to 10 momentum and then I just fail to roll, I go, you know what? I'm burning my momentum to make that a strong hit. It was a
Yeah.
miss, but I'm going to turn it into a strong hit.
Right.
Or sometimes you just want to turn a miss into a weak hit, So there are a lot of people who will burn on 5 or 6 even,
Mhm.
because that's just enough to get that over 1 dice. And so again, that's in yeah. Exactly.
I do like to burn things.
Story. Yeah. Well, if you got it, you may as well use it. Because that's the other nice thing about the mechanic is you keep building, right? And so,
Yeah, it is.
because I think in the last game we played, I was at 10 momentum, and I'm like, gosh, I got to burn this because I just got +1 momentum, and I got nowhere to put it.
Right, you're
and I'm
almost
still
losing
saving
it.
it.
Yeah,
I was wasting it. I was saving it for my big fireball at the end, and like that doesn't that's not worth it, right? So, so I like that again that the mechanics serve the story, the game.
Yes, yeah, for sure. This is something I'm like thinking about in the moment, but we've done a lot of well, really, it's like galaxy building, in the game we're playing right now. Is that like rules like in the book kind of thing, or is that something we've kind of broadened things out with?
Yes, it is in the book, and I may have to go
Sorry, I put you on the spot there, but
stand there and scratch. Give me 1 second to let the dog in because I think my wife left and now my dog is scared. So
okay,
I'll be right back.
Yeah, something we've done a lot is as time has gone on, it's
sorry
like
about that.
that's okay. There's a story kind of element where, like maybe there's a mission that pops up or something, and we're like, oh, well, that could be out on this satellite that's going around a planet. And then there's this moment where we're creating that together as a group. And so you're saying that is like part of the Starforged piece there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's kind of built in a couple of ways. One is at the beginning, right? So as you start it, I think we took 2 session zeros, right, to get going.
Yeah, that's right.
And the session 0 stuff is written into the rules, and so but that's from Ironsworn and Starforged both. They have these things called world truths, where you go through all these categories, like what does religion look like in your world? What does magic look like in your world? What does technology look like in your world? And they give you options to roll on tables, or you can make something up yourself. And then that starts to fill out that galaxy, starts to do that world building. And then as you go, like you were just saying, we get to a place and we're like, hey, that could be the satellite around this place over here.
Yeah.
As you're exploring, there are, and this is one thing that I think he did a good job adding into Starforged a little bit more of this. There are more oracles. There are a lot more things that you can roll on. That's a blessing and a curse because, when I made when I did the expanded oracles for Ironsworn, it fit, half an inch or something like that within a book of other expansions that I wrote. Okay. Well, when I did the expanded oracles for Starforged, it had to be a standalone book because that he has so many oracles that are he added for each type of planet. As you're out in the stars, what do you find, right? And so when you're doing that exploration, which I know Adam loves here, that you get prompted as to what that could be, and then if you kind of hit a wall or feel like you're getting the same stuff over and over again, there are always those core oracles which he brought over from. So Ironsworn had its own expansion called Delve that added some things about how to do a dungeon delve, and he kind of built a lot of that into Starforged from the ground up rather than as an expansion. And so there are these core oracles of action, theme, or descriptor and focus, which you can kind of pick and go, okay, what comes to mind with these 2 words? So you just roll, you grab 2 words, and you go, what is this? And so again, it encourages that exploration and story aspect of how does this hook in to our plot, and how does it hook into the world? Right?
Yeah, there really is a lot of cool like group creation from that I think comes out. So I just like going like a little more just like explaining practical kind of things. So just for people to understand with oracles, we are traveling through a space station and we're doing this exploration. So there's a point where we roll on those tables and it could say you come across a corridor,
we
rolled, we rolled like somehow we rolled corridor like 4 or 5 times in one session. And
that's because I was rolling on the wrong table. So,
or it may say, and we could be like, and then there's some other roles that can be made on tables, and we as a group would come up and say, well, what's this actually like look like and feel like? Or it could be like, there's a danger, up ahead kind of thing. And then we can communicate about, well, what is that danger? Is it like, well, maybe an airlock's broken, or maybe there's some kind of crazy mutated thing that's tearing things apart, or, and all of that gets informed by the tables, the oracles, but we get to speak into that.
Yeah. So there are tables and tables like this in the throughout the book, or in the back of the book for the oracle section. But the one I'm looking at right here is Spaceborne Peril versus Spaceborne Opportunity. And this you would roll after what you see as a Spaceborne encounter, right? So you might, you often end up rolling several different things. So here's a space sighting. You might find a large rogue asteroid. Okay, well, what's that doing, right? Well, it depends on if it's perilous or if it's an opportunity. If it was a peril, then maybe at this asteroid, there's a nearby settlement calling for help. Okay, well, how do you put those together? Oh, well, the asteroid's headed for their planet, of course, right? That totally makes sense. But if it was an opportunity, right, and you heard a friendly starship crosses your path or something, oh, well, maybe they found some ore here or something, right? And so there's an opportunity to be had at this rogue asteroid thing.
Right.
And so it's the combination not only of the individual oracles, but the ones that fit together, that they all kind of go together. And that was one of my, if I had a problem with Starforged, it was because there's so many oracles. Like if you're going to a planet, there's probably 5 or 6 oracles that you need to roll. And so I really recommend, some of the digital tools that they have, because it'll roll them all at once. And then, then you get a fuller picture and it doesn't bog down the game. Yeah. And that's another thing I think that Sean has done well, is he's encouraged the community to really put out stuff. So there are lots of options between CrewLink and we're using CrewLink. I can't remember some of the other ones, but even in Obsidian Vault, they've built one for that. And so there are lots of ways that you can make the gameplay run as smooth as it did in Ironsworn, even though you're bulkier in the material.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's something I think, like going from Ironsworn to Starforged, the rolling, I've noticed more rolling. I've also felt, maybe this is just my feeling, but it's felt like momentum gets built quicker.
Yes.
Because that's been like, and that's a shift I feel like I've seen probably just in, changing game and evolving a little bit with that. But those are the two things I feel like I've noted as a player, in that. But I really like these, I'm sure we've said this before, but like, if you're a GM out there and you're like, man, I just don't have a ton of prep time, like for this, like these are great games because of how much creation's happening at the table. Like, I'm sure, because we come in and we're just like, well, whatever kind of comes is what we're going with, it's how it feels, at least with the GM list kind of thing. But I think you could probably have a little bit of a idea, come in and let the roles follow that. But it's super helpful to not have to, it's like if you had no time but you want to run a game, these are really excellent systems to do that.
And in fact, it's the way I prefer to run and play games at this point. Like I don't like having pre-scripted stuff to a point. I will say, and I don't know how you feel about comparing our Ironsworn to our Starforged game directly, but in the Ironsworn game, if you remember, we were starting out, I was actually going to GM, and we had 3 players. One of Evan's friends was joining us at that point, and he ended up not being able to make it. And so I took over his character, and then I just started playing, and we didn't have a GM anymore.
Right.
It was 3 of us. But because I started off kind of GMing, we had the story from the beginning was there was this ice dragon. It's going to take over the land, and we had to stop it. Right. So we had this big goal. In Starforged, when we did our session 0 for this time, we were all like, you know what? We're garbage collectors. We're just we're just going up and down these planets, and we just pick trash. Like that's all we do. And like, and those were kind of the characters that we made and put together. And we didn't have an overarching thing.
Right.
And we found one.
Yeah.
But I
right.
feel like it you know, and it came up through gameplay.
Mhm.
But I feel like it's not necessarily the driving force like it was in Ironsworn, because we were picked like we're we were literally
Yeah. Right.
scavengers where we would just go around and get trash and hope to sell it and make some money, and that was
Right.
all we could, you know.
Yeah.
So we're kind of thrust into this role of not necessarily a hero, and I think that's one of the big differences between the two games. Is the Starforged feels more like you could almost be an everyday person and play it, right? And
Mhm.
whether you could do corporate espionage with this game. You know, you can do stuff like that versus Ironsworn, where it was, okay, I'm going to be the big hero and go out and do the big thing. And you can still have those epic things, and those epic things are going
Yeah.
to
Right.
come
Right.
up in Starforged, but it's definitely not as fantastical as I think Ironsworn base was, right? So.
Right. Right. Yeah. Barry was asking, what kind of ships are we flying around in? Is there ship-to-ship combat in Starforged?
Great question. Yeah, so every party starts with their home base, which is their ship, right? And of the assets, this is a new category of assets, there are modules. And so when you gain experience, you can either get new assets
Mhm.
for your character, or you can get assets for your ship and upgrade your ship. So, you know, you can get missiles, you can get shields, you can get an AI to run your ship for you. So there are lots of things like that that you can do
Mhm.
with your ship. And then there is ship to ship battle, and the ship to ship battle works just like an in-person battle is. It's just all about narrative positioning, right? So if you were floating out in space in your spacesuit and trying to take out a ship, you don't have the narrative positioning to do any damage to it, right? So you could say you want to make a combat move, but you really can't because you're not in a position to actually do damage.
Hmm.
But if you're in a ship and they're in a ship, well, yeah, now we're just fighting, right? And so on our ship, I'm the engineer, and I think Adam, you're the pilot, right?
Sometimes, yeah, we have a
Yeah,
trade-off, but yeah.
yeah, and Evan is our gunner, and so you know you attack kind of the same way that you normally would, where Evan's rolling with edge because that's
Mhm.
lining up the guns, right? And a lot of times you're rolling with edge too, Adam,
Mhm.
piloting around to try and skirt things. And so the way that combat and ship combat and any combat works is you have a track of 10 boxes that you are trying to fill based off of how tough the enemy is,
Mm.
and you can at any point declare, you know what, I think we've achieved what we need to achieve in this battle, whether it's we've got them on the run or whatever, and you roll just the 2 challenge dice and compare it to how many boxes you have filled on your track of 10. A lot of people online say it's worth it to try and stop at 6 or 7 boxes and cut it off there, that rather than burn more resources in a battle.
Hmm.
But we always push it to 10 because otherwise we always miss.
I've been burned before.
Yeah, I think even one time when we filled it to 10, we still lost, because we got a miss with a match or something.
Yep.
Because if you tie the challenge dice, that's considered failure.
Yeah, right.
So you build up that track, and that's also how you run adventures, right? If you swear on iron again, that you want to complete this vow or do this quest, then you track that by ticking up those boxes. And again, that's something that I think would be really cool to incorporate in any game, D&D or
Mhm.
whatever, where you fill this up, okay, and you play D&D, you slayed the dragon. Well, now you roll against your boxes and you see, did we accomplish the goal? Our goal was to slay the dragon. We did
Right.
just slay the dragon. I got it down to 0 hit points, but you failed. What does that mean? Well, that means the dragon was just a minion itself, and now a
Right.
bigger bad is there. Or it's Final Fantasy, and that was not my final form, and he powers up.
Yeah.
He comes back to life. Or maybe you killed the dragon and you find out it was actually your sister who'd been transformed into that dragon and was attacking you against your right. So like, there's a way to kind of put twists in
Yeah,
there
right.
when you're using those sort of tracking methods on.
Mhm.
And so that track is another form of a clock, basically. It's just done in a different way.
That's exactly it's a good segue because you mentioned the clock earlier with the encounter, and I was immediately like, you could use that tracking method that we use in this to see who gets to the sword first, who gets to the place first, kind of
Yeah.
thing. That would be a really good
Yeah.
way to follow that. It's like if you've done these things and you're filling it up, and yeah, I feel like I'm dominating. Matthew, you got any thoughts you want to toss in on there?
I am listening quite happily and imagining, and just like our audience is right now, as I've never played this game. So catching all this, same with Ironsworn, all of these different mechanics make me so excited, and I just got to get into a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we need to. We've talked about the storytelling and how that's informing these things. But one thing and I don't, just kind of asking this, Eric, how does that to you feel? I'm trying to remember what all we've played, but I was thinking about like Starfinder and Spelljammer specifically when it comes to like spacey kind of feel, and if you're going to like make a comparison in as far as like the way, not mechanics necessarily, but like just the storytelling aspect, like do you feel like that like looks different between those kind of things?
Yeah.
I
I
haven't
do
played
think
I haven't played Spelljammer. I'm just going to throw that out. I've only played
Right.
Starfinder, so I can't even answer that question, but like
I don't think I've played Spelljammer either, but I'm vaguely familiar. I know the name.
right.
But I would say your Spelljammer and your Starfinder, again, those are more epic. Those are more high fantasy within sci-fi. So a sci-fi realm. So I think you're going to be tackling bigger things. Where something like Lancer, right, that we played, was more focused, it was focused on you're in a mech and you're going to do this thing. And
Right.
so Starforged is not as focused as a Lancer. It's more, an open world type thing like a Starfinder is. But Starfinder, you tend to do, again, higher fantasy type quests, more epic. And also the setting, I think, in Starfinder, it is just assumed in Starfinder that you're going to have, aliens and you can be whatever you want type of thing. And Starforged has a very, they say right from the get-go, this is human centric. Basically everybody's human. You might have ghosts and things like on ghost ships and stuff like that, but this is humans, and you were thrown into this place called the Forge because humanity back on Earth was basically destroyed. And so it's about survival, and you are in this place and just trying to get by. And so, it does lend itself more to grounded adventures. Of course, the first thing we did was add in an alien. So, we're like, yeah, there's big moss aliens with tentacles, and like, so, and actually, one of the supplements that I wrote for Starforged was about aliens and cultures in general. So that if you are human centric, like how can you build cultures? Like if there was this human culture on this planet over here and another human culture on this planet, they would develop very differently, over the past 50 years, just because they are on different planets. They have different wood available. They have different minerals available. And so it would be much more different even than our cultures, here on Earth are.
Right.
And then I, gave some ways you could translate that into aliens if that's more your jam.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I do feel so, having played like Pathfinder and Starfinder a decent amount, and then playing this Ironsworn and then to Starforged, like it didn't quite feel. This feels different. It feels a lot more different to me. That's a weird phrase, but it, more different as far as Ironsworn feeling that like heroic but kind of gritty, like
dark grit. Yeah.
We're exploring, and it's fantasy mystical. It felt more mystical to me, kind of thing. And then this doesn't feel like, well, we just transposed everything there and threw it into space. No. Whereas, and I don't want to like dog it or anything, but when I played Starfinder, a lot of it feels like I'm just playing Pathfinder in space, which is fine. And at times that's what I want. But, it's just space orcs and space, all these kind of things, space elves.
Space elves.
And again, not dogging that. It's just a different feel of
Right.
like those things. And I found that pretty interesting because even with like that whole story mechanic of like, I'm going to swear on iron, which I love and exploit every chance I get, is like, it's still a thing, but instead of like, oh, I'm going to stand before this iron totem that no one knows where it came from out in the grassy knoll and like swear that I will protect this orphan girl, you know, kind of thing.
Yep.
Like, instead of like that, it's like, well, this like iron that came from somewhere that we've like put on the front of our ship to like protect it. That's like what I'm gonna swear on that, you know, kind of thing. And
remember, we had pieces of our
yeah, it's like the weapons. That's right. Oh yeah, it's off the ship. So
yeah, it's off the original ships that brought people to the forge.
That's right.
There are little pieces of that still floating out there.
Yep, that's right. So like my space phaser gun, you know, kind of thing has some iron built into it, and if I need to swear, it's right there. So even that, like, it's, you know, this has a different feel kind of deal than like what it you know was. So I like that a lot.
So let me just ask a question here. So you said Starfinder kind of lends itself to that more epic feel, and this one not so much. Is that because Starfinder, basically a GM has like some story planned out and it ends up being this, because of the planned out story is what makes it feel more epic? Or what is it that is that, and maybe I'm getting like the idea of epic mixed up. I love the idea of this one, the Starforged, being so narratively open, cooperative kind of thing that's made. Can that not also be epic, or am I thinking about the word epic?
No, you're right. It can be. It absolutely can be. And there are, you know, I just think that when you roll a character in Starfinder, right, you're rolling a guy who's ready to rumble. You are a technomancer. You are, you know, and you know you're going out there to take care of some business. When we rolled up our characters, we were like, I'm going to be really good at picking up garbage, and and I'm going right. And so like now we did take some, you know, some bigger ones, but so like one of the assets that Adam took was and I love it. I created the asset, so I better like it. It's logistician, where he's basically like Spock, right? So he can sit, or like Sherlock Holmes, and so he can just kind of sit and think and do that, you know, think 5 steps ahead and what do I need to do. That doesn't feel as epic as one that Evan took, which was basically kind of a he's like a sword fighting Jedi, right? So he's more down the Star Wars line.
Yeah, right.
And had you know, all of us kind of taken more of that epic moves route, you know, and I didn't either. I took I'm good at sitting at my bench and putting wires together. Like and so like that's what I do. So like my adventure is when they're fighting, I'm like, ooh, there's a fire over there on the ship, you know, because you know, on Star Trek, every time they get hit, you know, by a phaser, everybody's like, whoa, and you know, and the sparks flying off, right? So it's my job to go put out the sparks, and that's what I do. You know,
do it from wires on your desk.
That's right. I will go shut down that system, because look, in Star Trek, they always had to go to the panel. That's the lazy man's way. I am so much above that I can do it right from my engineering console. I just sit there and go.
So wait, which one's lazy?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Okay, fair enough. But okay, work smarter, not harder. That's what. So, but that's the character that I took, is I wanted to be good at engineering stuff, and so I just, you know, we were in this huge fight with a second adventuring crew who was chasing us down.
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And you know, you guys were fighting them off. You had your pistol and were blasting away. Evan was like, ching, ching, ching. And I'm over there at the door like, I've almost got us out, guys. Give me a second.
And it was all needed. It was all needed as the thing.
It was, it was needed. It just didn't really feel epic to be like, I unlocked the door.
Right, yeah.
So,
but what I love is I'm imagining somebody, now this is not your character or who you picked, but I'm imagining somebody who, like, their character is like this grossly overweight and like bound to his desk, never really gets out of it, bare feet, has like chicken and stuff on their shirt where they've been eating, but they're like working working on it, and like that's the hero. That's the
Yes.
epicness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the first pictures I found for my character actually looked like that. It was he had like these bib overalls, big huge pot belly and like a wife beater underneath and all this, monkey grease dripping off of him with a wrench. But there was something about it that I think he had like a modern gun and modern stuff. And I'm like, I can't. It was more like a crazy zombie apocalypse survivor, and I'm like, I can't put this guy in space. And so I ended up making this picture. But that is exactly who I was kind of thinking of to begin with. Because I'm just
That's
like,
awesome.
I can make stuff. Yeah, just bring it over here. I'm not walking over there.
I do
I think
feel
of this guy that I knew in college. I guess I shouldn't say his name. He might listen to this someday. But he would just sit in his room on his beanbag. He was kind of bigger, and he would sit on his beanbag, and people would walk in. And he'd be like, "I think you'd like that music. It's that tape over on the floor." This is when tapes.
Yeah.
Cassette tapes were a thing, guys, in case you don't know what that is. Anyway, he's like, pick up that tape there. And I'd pick it up. He'd like, you should listen to that. I'm like, okay. And I'd walk out. And then somebody else would come in and be like, oh, up on my desk, there's a glass. And it has and he would just sit there and kind of guide people to different rooms. And he always had like stuff. And
he knew how to
name
use
was
the
Steve.
Force, that guy. He
Yeah.
had mind telepathy.
to jump on that question initially, like I think like with epicness, I think like I think with either, okay, we're still talking Starfinder, Starforged, making any comparison. You probably can do anything with either one, really, like kind of thing. But I do think there's like an inherent epicness to Starfinder that I would go into, and that would be what I want to play. Like if I want to try to make this huge epic thing that I'm trying to guide, then I probably would go that way. But I think it's like the choices of the table too. Like if, and I think we're kind of in a middle where we're making some like tongue in cheek decisions about like what we're coming across or what like the things that we're coming up with at the table. Sometimes it's a little like there's humor as well as like adventure, and that's totally awesome. Yeah. But I think if you wanted, okay.
No, I was just gonna say it reminds me of the difference. So I remember when we did play Starfinder once, and I think I was Android Akash P something, I can't even remember. But anyway, I had like built-in guns, and I was smart, and I could whatever. And there was somebody who used like the Force. It was basically the Force. I don't remember what it was called, but you had like
a telekinetic thing.
So I picture Starfinders maybe having characters like that are and maybe this is what you're saying, that are obviously kind of set to rumble. They're heroes versus a Kurt Russell in Big Trouble in Little China sort of.
Yes.
Hero, right.
Yeah.
And that's what it sounds like when you guys, you're like, if somebody's knocking on your door asking you pay your dues, you tell them what Jack Burton says. Check's in the mail.
So, maybe heroic versus epic is what we're, like that could be the word, like heroic inherently versus what you make of it, kind of thing. And so I definitely think you could go like this huge, big thing with your choices, or you could keep it even more minor than what we're doing, kind of thing, and have a good time with that.
Yeah, and we have a slice of epic, I think, coming up. We discovered these aliens and a dead civilization, and they're like they sent out this probe that was maybe trying to restart their civilization, but our characters, rather than being like, we're going to save them, are more like, it's the right thing to do. Like, we're getting in trouble, but it's kind of the right thing to do, and we're just the average guys, but who else is going to do it if we don't? And so, we're going, and it's more of the reluctant hero sort of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Evan's got a good point here about that thing.
Oh, yes, this is true. So, Starfinder has, right, you level up, right, and you're leveling up your stats and things like that. So, as Evan says, numbers don't go burr in Starforged.
Yeah, right.
So Starforged is more like Guild Wars, as Evan says. It's horizontal progress. So horizontal progress, what I mean by that is, rather than buffing your stats, getting better AC, getting better to hit, getting better things like that, you become a more widely applicable skill set, basically, is what you gain. And so, like, I can pick up an asset that might let me be able to shoot a laser gun instead of just using my engineering pad. And it's not necessarily going to make me any more powerful because I would still use the same stat. It just gives me narrative positioning to actually fire a gun, or as Evan just said in the chat, more gadgets on my utility belt,
Yep,
right?
yep.
To be able to throw things because, like I throw a stun bomb or something, I think is what I did one time. And so the horizontal progression of your character, I love that phrase, Evan, thank you, is really building out those assets as you level up to become
Sure.
the character that you want to become. And it also, here's the other thing that I think is cool about that that's built in. And Sean Tompkin highlighted this in one of his blog posts about how you could play like the Mandalorian in Starforged. That you,
Oh, nice.
you basically be the Mandalorian. Is that there would be character progress, and so he actually went through the Mandalorian storyline and said, "Here's when he took this asset, and here's when he got this asset, and here's
That's
in this
cool.
episode he got this asset and learned this thing."
Mm.
But he's still the Mandalorian. But his character is, you're getting to know his character more, and his character is becoming
Wow.
bigger and more than just that one-dimensional picture of a bounty hunter that you saw in the very first episode.
That's cool. That's cool. So you're not the straight up GM in the game we're playing right now, and you weren't necessarily that either in Ironsworn, but you are helping us because you have a better sense than me and Evan do of the gameplay, So I was just wondering, like, with the two things, do you feel like you've seen any kind of progression, or like this is like the big difference as far as someone who's kind of helping guide it, if nothing else, in that between the two systems for you?
Between the two systems, I think the biggest thing is in Ironsworn we set our background vow at the beginning, and in this one we don't really have a background vow. We're just kind of going where this ancient civilization thing. But that was more of a choice just by us, not a wrong or right choice. Just how we decided to play. But for me, I don't know. Even way back when we were still playing 4E or maybe even 3.5. I think the last time I ran a game for us at Matthew's table, I had a deck of cards, poker cards that had quests on it, and I flipped it and I said, "Okay, this is the quest we're going to do tonight."
Yeah, right.
Right? And that's where we ended up with the underwater, and like there was this dragon, and then there was the prince who was the foppish prince, and everybody thought that he was an idiot, and he turned out to be, actually running things and smart and all that stuff. And that all came up just on the fly. And I think for whatever reason, that's just how I operate better.
Yeah.
So I like having, a general idea for the story, but if I find that if I have too much of the story in mind, even when I'm playing solo, I just complete the whole story instantly. So like I can just play the whole movie and the story's over. And I'm like, well, I don't need to play because I already know. I already know what happened. I just told the story
Interesting.
myself. And so in Starforged, what I like about not being a GM, about sharing that, is that my mind doesn't get to run forward like that because, you and Evan get to hold me back and be part of that decision-making process. And I feel like I jump on you guys' feet too often where I'm like, no, I got an idea, because that's, my brain just keeps going there. And so I like having that shared decision making because we get ideas that you wouldn't get on your own, and they can be really cool. Almost like, do you remember when we did Microscope with Evan and we ended up with this full circle, that there was this lich and we were trying to stop him, and we helped the civilization. We ended up this time travel thing, and the guy that had hired us to stop him ended up the lich from the future but went to the past, and like all that crazy stuff happened because of the shared decision making. Because at the end of that, I'm like, I never would have seen that coming. Right. And that's what I think happens when you share control of a story, is the story almost takes on a life of its own. I hesitate to compare it to a Ouija board, but it's, like everybody's touching it and nobody's quite sure where that story is going to go.
Right.
And it's cool. It's cool.
So let me ask you this. What's the ideal number of sessions? What's the ideal number of sessions? Because the reason I'm asking, we just finished a campaign, like a long campaign, finished it. We're going to take the next month and a half, 2 months, whatever. And we're just going to do some like small things. And I'm like thinking, man, how cool would it be to bring in something like this where it's like, there's not a GM. We're all kind of creating it together. We see what would be like the minimum number of sessions to make this like, that's cool.
I think you could honestly get by with 2. If if you wanted to, you could do a session 0. You make your characters, and I think you could do a one shot with this. They run one shots at conventions and things with this. You just keep your vow to a simple one, and set your difficulty low enough that you can mark that off as you play throughout the night. But I think probably its sweet spot is, probably in the range of 5 to 10 would be my guess. As far as, you kind of set your background vow and you want to do stuff, because I do think, and this is one of the reasons why I tripled all the oracles that were there. I do think at some point, even on a D100 table, you're hitting the words, the same amount of times that you go, I've already thought about that. I already had an idea with that.
Right.
And so I think at some point you kind of run out of creative juices for that sort of thing. And so I do think that this lends itself to less gameplay than say a 2-year D&D campaign, where it kind of fills itself out. Because in that shared creative space, there can be some story fatigue, I think, that happens later on. I don't think we've hit that necessarily yet, but I think I could foresee it happening. Would be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think a smaller number of sessions, but I don't know. What do you think, Adam?
Yeah, I do. I agree. I agree with that. We have played, besides those session 0 times, and when we're talking about our stuff, it's a 2-hour slot is like what we're doing, which is a little different. Thursday nights are for us are 4-ish, maybe 5 sometimes even. So we're just time wise, we're how to compare that. But what have we done? 3 actual sessions besides the session 0s that we did, maybe 2. Because it feels like a lot more has happened than what I would think would happen in those sessions. I think we've done 3 adventures kind of sessions.
Yeah, we've done 4. So we did 2 session 0s and we've done 4.
Okay. So again, like, I would liken it to, again, we're naming off a bunch of stuff. Microscope, also Upwind are both things that I want to talk about on this podcast at some point. But when we played Upwind years ago, I remember like being like, I feel like I just played a like multi-year campaign in the amount of stuff, because with the way that storytelling and the way that you resolve things, not blow by blow, but like this scene is what I want to resolve, and we're going to do that. Like you do so much in that. I feel like these games are like in between what I was seeing with Upwind of like just massive amounts of storytelling happening in one play versus, blow by blow over here. We're going to be in a combat all night long with D&D. Somewhere in the middle is where we're hitting with these things where it's like, there's this back and forth, but we're still moving the story like massively forward. And in 4 sessions, I feel like, we've done a lot of stuff. And, like Ironsworn, I don't actually remember, maybe around 10 sessions that we did for that, 12, maybe. It was short. Yeah. It was short comparatively to what I'm used to with games. And I was like, I'm like emotionally invested in this game.
Yeah.
Like on the level of these other games we played for a long time. And it was like really cool to see just how much, so I do think like you could do, the short of it is what Eric said, where it's like, in that, like, for me, I think would be 6 to 10, you could get a really cool story in and feel like I enjoyed that. I feel satisfied. Things happened. We made like these vows take place. And I think it's a cool, like shorter game.
I'm intrigued by both Ironsworn and Starforged, because for a particular reason. One is I've been running a campaign that's gone on way too long because it's had like the long break. The reason it's had a long break is my job has a lot of like, I have to create, I'm constantly writing and doing that creative work. I feel like my brain has very little space left for planning the game. planning where the game is going to go. And then secondly, sometimes you're kind of wanting to toss out, okay, somebody else want to run something, but people don't always feel confident, or they're not as good as they want to be at like putting together the story. And so these ideas of like, let's take a big part of the prep out of it, but keep all of the narrative and storytelling and growth in it. That's very enticing for someone like me in the stage of work and life and family, because all those things take a piece of your mind, a piece of your time, and you only have so much. And sometimes you end up giving yourself the short shift for what you're putting together for the game. And so something like this sounds, and the same with like Microscope, which is you're kind of building like the world. I haven't played it, but is that right?
Yep.
But it's again, that cooperative creativity. I love the idea of that in all of these things.
Yeah.
Well, one thing that could really help you with that is in the session 0, when you're deciding the world truths in each category. At the end, it kind of gives you a quest idea for a background quest. If you want that to be the big story, the big overarching story for your campaign, it's right there at the beginning. Yeah, you don't even have to think about it. You just go through, okay, what do we want our world to look like? Well, in this world, this would make sense as a quest. And so again, it's handed to you on a platter, basically. If you want to use it, and of course you can ignore it, but it's there.
You can constantly like, you started and this was the goal and the quest, but then everybody kind of building together. This seems much more important and exciting, and that becomes the big thing. And you can go,
yeah. That's cool. So I think there's a couple ways to answer this, but if people want to start looking into playing Starforged, what would they do?
Well, you can definitely grab the as Matthew just found right before we started filming here or going live. It's on sale right now on drive-through, and this became so popular that Modifius, the big company, picked up Starforged. So if you want the hard copy, you got to go through Modifius. You can just order it from there. But if you want the PDFs, they're on sale right now on drive-through RPG. And along with the sci-fi is the first official expansion. There we go. There's the link up on the screen.
Like you guys are going to be able to remember that.
Yeah, just let me read that out loud for all of our listeners. And
we are going to, it's in the chat also.
That's probably better.
I will share that on our socials.
All the social,
also.
Yeah. The first official expansion is called Sundered Isles, and it's more of a Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And adds a little bit of a new mechanic with what's called a cursed die that you can roll a d10, and I think if it turns up a 0 or a 1 or something like that, then the cursed version of the answer happens. And there are these 2 moons, and it depends on the phases where the moons are and how they affect things. And your ship is not a starship; it's a sailing ship. And so, Barry, this is for you. And you can still get your cannons on there, and you could do the big battles on the sea. But it definitely takes it back more to the fantasy, but it's meant to be more Pirates of the Caribbean, almost real world-ish. So that's also in that bundle, I think, on RPG, drive-through RPG. Ironsworn itself, base Ironsworn, is free on and always has been on drive-through. So you can go there and get the original Ironsworn game for free, read it and check it out. And then the other thing that I would suggest is, because if you're coming from a background of yar, says Barry, if you're coming from a background of D&D type games where it's definitely more role focused, as like dice rolling focused rather than narrative focused, more mechanic focused, then it can be intimidating. So I would watch an episode of Me, Myself, and Die, which is a YouTube channel. Season 2, he played Ironsworn, and you can kind of get a feel for what it can look like. And of course, he's a professional voice actor, and he does amazing edits of his stuff. But it will still give you a feel of really what you can do. And I think once you watch it and you see it in action, you go, okay, now I know. So get the free book of Ironsworn, or download the on sale and watch that. And I think you're going to fall in love with it.
Yeah, for sure. I want to plug you too, Eric. So do you have you mentioned some asset stuff. I'd like to let people know about that too. You have some stuff that people could pick up too when they get into this.
Yes. So I publish under the Play Every Role name, but you can get my Iron Sworn stuff under Iron Smith. I'm the Iron Smith, and then the Starforged stuff under Star Smith. So if you search for Star Smith or Iron Smith, you'll hit my stuff. For Starforged in particular, I did mechs. So I brought mechs into the game where
Nice.
you could use those more, and that was when we were playing Lancer. So I thought this is fun. Let's get over here. And like I said, the cultures and aliens, and then I put in just some new assets, and then I did expand the oracles. A lot of people have liked my spiral bound version of the oracles, which you can't get on drive through, but everything else is on drive through. But the spiral bound is on Lulu. Yes, mechs, and each mech has its own set of stats, and so you actually start using the stats of the mech rather than just your own personal stats, which I think is kind of a cool change. And you can give your mech different modules and things like that. So check those out if you want to. And all my stuff on drive-through is pay what you want. So get it for free. People go out there and download it for free. Try it out. Just see if you like it. If you happen to get it to the table and play it and you do enjoy it, then you're welcome to come back, buy it again for like $1 or something, right? And then I'll get 50 cents. But please get it for free first. I'm not here to make money. I'm here to help you have fun at your table, hopefully, and to give myself a creative outlet.
I think you guys should buy it, but that's me. So
try it before you buy it. Try it before you buy it, please.
I did pop in your drive-through for Starsmith specifically, since we're talking about Starforged today, but you can find a link to all of Eric's stuff through drive-through RPG in that way.
Yeah,
cool.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think we should talk an NPC.
Yeah.
We all think.
All right. Hey, Eric, I really appreciate the slant you bring when you come on here with these games. That idea of being able to, it really does remind me of what I kind of discovered when I played Sentinels for the first time. That idea that you don't have to, it's like everybody can play, and the bad guy takes care of himself.
Right.
The game kind of, the tables help you take care of the GM role. I know a lot of people that I talk to, the biggest hurdle for them getting into doing RPG stuff is they don't have anybody who knows how to run a game. They don't have anybody who feels confident in running a game. They don't know how to, think like a GM, whatever. It's like, hey, this is a great way to start. You've got these tables, you learn how to use those. Together you make the game. And then, maybe at some point people are like, hey, I want to try being a GM of a, regular D&D game or something. They can do that. But
yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, very cool.
All
right. We're going to get into one of these NPCs from the Masks book. This is Douglas Green, the Avaricious Merchant. Douglas is a twig of a man, vibrating with nervous energy and exotic stimulants. He dresses richly, advertising his wealth, and he has a hawk's gaze. His voice is high and nasal, and he spits out numbers so fast it seems like he's stuttering. He has all the cards, and he knows it. Sly smiles and serious appraisal alternate across his face. Profit is all. He's ready for a lifetime of luxury and is willing to cut out any obstacle that's in the way. Money will buy everything he lacks, and those who can't see that don't deserve to be in business. His motivation is that he grew up the son of a tinkerer, spat upon and constantly roving, doing odd jobs for a meal. He's never going back to that. He has to buy friends and companionship, so he'd better have enough money to keep them. His background, his father made the trade of a lifetime, getting Douglas an apprenticeship in the Merchants Guild. Most of the guild shunned his teacher, but he taught Douglas several key theories and let the child read books about trade. Douglas mastered them and noted the crisis makes or breaks a merchant. He orchestrates crises to ensure that his goods are in demand, working with bandits and unsavory sorts to eliminate competition and keep the city desperate. This is Douglas Green, the Avaricious Merchant. His phrase is, a sword is precious in a town under siege, 35 drachmas, unless you test my patience by haggling. So it's Douglas. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think he fits. He's he's an NPC that you could see in real life today. I'll I'll manufacture crises so that I can sell. Isn't that what Tony Stark was doing in the first Iron Man movie? So like he was selling missiles to both sides. And I think that's who he is. He's a villain. And as I was reading it through that ahead of time, I thought this guy better be a villain. He better be making up terrible things. And so they put that in at the end, and I thought that fit him well. The only thing that stuck out to me that I'm like, what is this? Is that he went to this trade school and read books about trade, and I'm like, what? Buy low, sell high. Like, how many books does he have to read? I don't. That might be the only thing that I would take out of his backstory. Is I don't think he had to go to trade school for that. I think he was just so greedy, and so I'm not gonna be, the guy in the gutter anymore.
Yeah,
I will do whatever I have to,
right.
To make that happen. Because I think that builds that. Reinforces that motivation rather than just, hey, I was top in my class at reading my book, and
Right.
but I do think he fits. You could plop him
and
in.
I read that as he got into the school. Nobody liked his teacher. He was kind of shunned still, but at least it gave him access to the ideas behind how money and trade and psychology and how to influence and not just influence, but force people to do what you want. Like I imagine he got the books that was all, like what's that 48 Laws of Power, and it's all about like how to be Machiavellian.
Yep.
It's like not just like, oh, here's stuff that happens. It's like if you want to like crush your enemies, here's the psychology, the sociology, the economics, the political that you need to do that. And that's what I kind of got.
Interesting.
That he did with, he got in there. Nobody really cared much for his teachers, but he got access to books, which he didn't have as a tinkerer. And because of these books, it was like all this, like how to crush people for your gain.
That's what every Red Markets character needs.
That is exactly, that was my note on this. This sounds like a taker.
Yep.
This sounds like something I've done in a Red Markets game.
Yes.
I was thinking about the negotiation part where it's like, okay, we're going to go slash all the water in the town so that there's desperate need for water. So when I go get water, it's, skyrockets. So
the price is up. It's like, well, barrel of water, that's not that big a deal, except you guys have none. And you have it now for days. Well, how much is that barrel of water worth to you? That's exactly who this guy is. The sword's precious in a town under siege, isn't it? 35 drachmas. If you even like haggle, it's going up.
Yeah.
So because you got
look at me crossways. Now it's 40.
Like, what are you going to do about it?
Yep. Exactly.
How do you put this in a game without the PCs just attacking this guy? It's like, well,
because he has what they would need. He has. Yeah,
and
he has.
And he's willing to walk away. It's not like he's doing the, you don't even have to tell him that he's like making the crises, at least at first. You can just be like, hey, this is it. You guys want it? Because what are they going to do? Are they going to like beat him and take his stuff? Oh, now they're the villains. Most PCs aren't going to like put themselves in that kind of light.
Well, and he doesn't even have the stuff on him, right? He has learned that no, I don't have this here because somebody can take it from me. It's going to be delivered by some random person who doesn't know what they're delivering, right? And go through 3 different hands before it actually gets to you. Right. And I will only I will bribe the people to make sure it gets to you, but only if you pay me more, right? Because otherwise I'm going to send it and they may just take it for themselves. Right. So you can't hurt him because he's untouchable because he has all the cards. Like
Yeah. Douglas Green, common name. I kind of like his character. I mean, like it in a evil sort of way.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. We have one piece in the haversack, and it's not exactly a question, and we're going to actually play around with this today in our last moments here. So Rob, who has been on, talked about riddles before. A lot of times we see Rob in the chat. We had talked at the gaming convention Winter War a little bit about this in some off time, and he had an idea for us. I think we mentioned a couple times about doing some different segments at different times, and so he had sent this. into us. Hi, Adam and Matthew. Here is the idea I talked about for a potential show segment. If you ever feel like taking a break from the encounter starter or NPC, I'm tentatively calling it, quote, Creature Corner. It would work best for those shows when you have a guest host, but could fit any week. We have Eric with us today, so why not start now?
Perfect.
The idea is to choose a commonly used monster in a fantasy RPG and alter it for various descriptors. For example, the creature might be the goblin. Each person would discuss how they would alter the standard goblin to fit 3 categories, such as demonic, plagued, and elemental. We're going to use this exact example today, so you guys can start thinking. You would have an excellent variety in each show, as you can have a new monster in 3 new categories. It would also be very easy to come up with topics using random tables, which I'm all for, and I think that's the way we'll go in the future. So you aren't stuck trying to choose the category or monster. We love tables. If you did it at the end of the show, it would be easy to expand or pare down as needed to allow for adjusting the pod time. You can even add a bit of fun if you randomly choose everything during the show to give an example of how a GM can easily make up interesting monsters on the fly. Feel free to take or leave anything in there. Just thought you might want some occasional variety away from the Gnome Stew stuff. Thanks, Rob. I think it's really cool idea, and wanted to just go ahead and throw us into it today to try it out. This won't be like an every time, but I think it's a really cool idea from Rob that we could jump in on. So it's not random today. We're going to just go with his examples, but goblins, and we have ourselves elemental, plagued, and demonic as kind of like a template over them. So what would you guys do with that?
I'm going to let Eric, our co-host, start, as I just
so
heard this and I'm like unsure, but I love to play off of people. So Eric.
Yeah. Okay, so I've been thinking about this all night. Like I'm so excited about this. Like, okay, so I have 2 things. So bear with me for both. But the first thing is, remember, rising GMs out there, that you don't have to use the stat block as written, right?
Yes.
So there's a difference between the mechanic and the kind of narrative trappings that go with it. So
yes.
So the big thing is, think about what purpose you're trying to accomplish, right? So what do you want to accomplish with this goblin? Okay, so if you want this goblin to be, a huge fight for people, then maybe what you do is you actually just take the dragon stats, right? Take a red dragon stats, give it to a goblin, okay?
Uh-huh.
And so now tell the story of what is this goblin. This is a goblin in a huge mech suit that has like, a thing on his, like almost like oh gosh, what is the bagpipes, right? He squeezes here and
kind of thing.
belches out these flames, right? And so that's your fire breathing. And then the double claw is actually, he's got these like Doc Ock arms that shoot out like saw blades, like spinning saw blades, like and people. And the tail strike is actually these bolas that come out of this wooden mech thing, right? And so you can take any stat block in the book and turn it narratively into what you want it to be, as long as it fits and serves the story that you're trying to tell, right? So okay, so specifically though, so here's number 2 then. Is if we go elemental with a goblin, right? So I love the idea that we have an elemental goblin. Well, what is going to happen if this goblin has elemental powers, right? So he's basically what's his name, Johnny from the Fantastic Four, right? Flame on, and he just he's all fire, right? Okay, so how did this happen? Well, he probably had some tragic accident. He was probably spit into the plane of fire, and barely got out, like he was almost dead. But because he could turn on fire, all these other goblins are like, oh, he's so powerful, we make him king, right? And so he becomes the king. But King Goblin has a secret, and the secret is that every time he flames on, it kills him a little bit more, right? And so he's got to bully people and show his power enough to keep the kingship, because that's how he gets the most cheese, and that's all he cares about for some reason is cheese. And so now he's got to have that, and so now the goblins are pushing him to go expand the kingdom more, because he's the big fire god. He can do this, and so he's got to make a show of it. But what's happening? So now these goblins are moving in, and how do you deal with that, right? So just by taking this monster and tweaking a little bit what you have there, and go, what's elemental about this? How can we make it elemental? Now you've got a whole story and a whole plot line that can go with it. Right? So anyway, I was just in love with the idea of the goblin in the mech suit spitting
Yeah,
out
no, that's
fire
great.
by
Yeah,
pushing the bagpipes down. Yeah, I'll
yeah,
pass it
sweet.
off to somebody else.
I'm going to pass it right over to Adam as I don't.
So I'm gonna be more like general. I love the idea of using like they have come across this random goblin has just like been digging in the mud or whatever and finds a like shard of some elemental thing that like empowers it, or um some item that maybe this demonic creature has like infested and it suddenly empowers, those kind of things I think would be like really cool to just bring that flavor into them and allow them to have these type of powers that would happen. So it's like suddenly this goblin can shoot cold, or like there's cold radiating out from this thing, and part of that for me is like the explanation of what you're seeing, I think, when you're encountering something like this. And I love the King Goblin. That's where I would go to, is like, that seems like a culture where it's like whoever has the most power is the person in charge, this big boss, kind of thing. And it's like they have some power, so they're now in charge. But for the elemental, they've started to shift and change and become more elemental, or the demonic ones are starting to like morph because of this connection to the item, thing. The other one was plagued. Again, the story in my brain would be, no matter what it is, these things have come across something. So something is plaguing maybe the forest, and it is I was going to use infested again, but it's infected the like goblin that is now morphing and changing into something new. But I do love, we brought like the idea of like reskinning things before. I love that idea. I think that's a different take, even Eric. Like, I've done a lot of reskinning where it's like these stats are like what I'm using, and then I'm gonna like make some creative ways for it to make sense. But I love the idea of like, that is just like insane to give dragon stats to a goblin. But the way you explained it totally makes sense to me. It's like, yeah, that's how you could make that happen, instead of having to like make this whole mech thing also and just a goblin that's normal. So those are the kind of the things I would be thinking through, with that too.
So I didn't do any thinking in this before. I just kind of heard it. And I think for me, like what I would do is you come across goblins and you're fighting them, and the goblins typically are not the greatest challenge for a party of
Right.
adventurers. Goblins are pretty low level. But then you have coming from the back one that just seems like tall and emaciated, and its arms are longer than normal, maybe it's kind of dragging on the ground, and it walks with a limp, and it has like this huge skull of a bird put over its head with that long beak.
Nice.
And there's like yellow filth kind of floating around it, and as it comes, there is this cloud, fetid, what do they call that when it's like really nasty, the
cloud.
fetid,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like
FETID, however you say that.
yeah. The nasty cloud of disease that rolls around this thing, and constitution checks, and you don't even know like where or how this thing came about. Or how the idea is, I don't think in the book there's a plague goblin listed.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so for me, it's like I've got the goblins and they're fighting them, and it seems pretty standard. They know how to fight them, but then suddenly this thing comes in that has a different sort of ability about it, and they don't know what it is. And I would try to at least have a couple different things about this. So that cloud, and you decide what that radius is going to be on there, so that it makes it really hard for people to get close and just kind of chop this thing down. But then also, I don't know, maybe if it's claw attacks, or if you cut it, blood splatters on you, there is a high chance of something bad plague. And so for me, the creativity comes in, and like, what is the plague going to be? It's not just going to be like necrotic damage, because just damage is still, whether I say it's necrotic damage or I say it's slashing damage, it's only going to be like, do they have, resistances or whatever, but it's not very story. For me, it would be something that would, so I, once with, one of our characters, this wasn't a goblin, they ended up with a kind of curse on them. They had to really work on holding their will to hold their body shape, or else anytime they kind of let their mind think too hard about the fight or whatever was going on, and their will slipped down, they didn't roll high enough. Their body would just turn into an amorphous blob and kind of down into the rocks and stuff. And they had to mentally hold their body together while they're trying to do anything.
It was awesome.
And he just could not do it. He kept kind of flopping back into this like blubbery mess. I think of, is it Mystique that turned into this senator and like he,
Yes.
Anyway,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So, I would make the plague that comes on them something that is so kind of unique and different than what you would think of with a plague. It's not just like, oh, you're a little bit sick, but it's like
Right, yeah.
complete, hardcore retch vomiting that your body's doubled over and you're just spewing. Like, it seems like you could never hold this much fluid in you. You don't know where it's coming from, to the point that you can't attack until you roll to stop. But it would be one of those things. It's like you have to continue to concentrate on not hurling. Every time you hear a squish, your partner hits somebody and you hear the squelch, you're like, and then somebody over there, like, they're just fighting these little normal goblins. They bonk one of them on the head, and like, you hear the crack of bones, and you're like, and it's like, and so I would put it at a pretty high DC that these guys are going to just be puking and unable to do anything, or something else. I just make up something, but for me, it's that idea of being able to take something they think is just so easy and common and making it completely unexpected and different than they would. So I took plague. I didn't do anything with it, demonic or what was the other one?
Elemental.
Yeah.
Elemental. But you can imagine that again, they think they're just fighting regular orcs, but there's one. And then make it something so crazy that it like changes the battlefield. I think that's what makes it the most fun is not just like you got one really hard guy, so your best dude walks up and just cracks on it, but something that like with this guy, I would make that cloud that travels around him, not just like 30 feet. I'd make it like, 60, 70 feet, so much that they can't quite get to it in one round. They have to stop somewhere in the middle and then begin to fight this stuff off. So it's controlling the battlefield as it ambles around, and again, the description, it's long and thin and stringy, and it just looks, a goblin never looks great. This thing looks 10 times worse.
Yeah, right.
And so that's kind of what I do.
Yeah.
Off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Super cool.
I had not thought about the plagued one, but what just came to mind for me was was it Typhoid Mary, who inadvertently went around and gave everybody typhoid, but she was immune, right? But she was the disease carrier. So now I'm thinking, what if there's a town that they all have, like Harry Potter, they have creature or whatever, so everybody has this goblin servant or whatever, and there's a plague going around and nobody knows, nobody can find the source, and it's just one lonely goblin who's serving everybody food, and nobody suspects them at all, and you got to track, find that out, track them down, and now this goblin didn't do anything wrong. They're just trying to be the best servant that they can be, and in fact, you probably want to even free the goblin, but the goblin's killing everybody inadvertently. So how do you handle that?
Nice.
Yeah, that could be another fun storyline to give it.
Yeah. So this is great when there's 3 of us on here because we play off of each other's ideas.
Yes. And that's how Starforged works.
Yeah, that's right.
How Starforged works.
Yeah. Good. Something I wanted to toss out real fast was there's an account that like our Rise of the GM account on Instagram follows, Regulus RPG, and one of the things they put out, it's a lot more mechanical than what we just did, but it's like make a goblin special, so like if your groups, that's the one I actually just pulled up, was like if you are fighting that, you're GMing a night where they're going to come up against some goblins, you could roll a die and they've got 6, it's a D6, and it just shows, and you roll the die and it says, this goblin has elemental spells, and then it like names off a bunch of stuff you can do. It's a really cool resource for that. So I actually just shared that in our stories on Instagram. You can check that out too if you're on Instagram. And it's a little more mechanical than what we just did, but kind of in the same line. So be sure to check them out.
That brought to mind another one. MCDM put out a book called Flea Mortals. That's right. the SRD, or maybe not even all the SRD, but a lot of the D&D creatures, it's made for 5e, and it's a kind of a reimagining of them, but trying to make them unique. So the goblins in there are different than the orcs, and they're different in a
Right, yeah.
specific way, so they don't just confuse them as low level creatures, right?
Yeah.
Demons are different than, I forget what the other one is, right? That is very
Devil.
similar.
Yeah.
Devils, yeah, demons and devils are extremely different in his books, so that you can actually tell the difference between them.
Okay,
so
cool.
so that's another one to check out. Flea Mortals,
Flea Mortals.
MCBM.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome.
So,
Eric, thanks so much.
Still sitting here thinking about the plague. The last thing I'm going
Yeah.
to throw out is what
Yeah.
if you had a goblin, maybe like along what Eric was thinking, nobody knows that this is the one that's doing it, is a goblin that's just a little servant or whatever, but it's basically the 10 plagues that you find in the book, in the book of Genesis.
Oh.
And they happen in order. And so like first there's, I should know what the order of these are, but somewhere in there's like all these frogs just like everywhere in everything. And then there's the, all the way up to the firstborn male of everyone is going to die. It's like,
They don't find the goblin.
Got to get that goblin.
if they don't find the goblin. And so
Yeah.
maybe they start to realize, wait a minute, I recognize some of these plagues as what I remember hearing from the book of Genesis. What's the next one? Oh, and then that happens. Oh
Yeah.
no, we better get this figured out before, boom.
Yeah.
So, and maybe
Very
at
cool.
the end, they all flee and the water spreads apart and okay. You don't have to go the whole story.
Very cool.
Love it.
Yeah, Eric, thanks so much for being on today. It's always great to have you, and it was great.
Man,
to
I love it.
talk about
Thanks
this, so, yeah.
for having me.
Yeah.
So much fun.
And
Cool.
so we will have Eric on again for sure. And we are going to, I think, wrap this up for this time, but we are going to be talking further in our Places series. Ruins
next time. Yep.
We've always been kind of butting up against it. We're going to go there into the ruins. So join us next time as we talk about ruins in our Places series right here on Rise of the GM. Eric, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
Yep. Happy to be
We'll
here.
see
Bye,
you guys
everybody.
all next time.
Yeah. Thanks all.
Bye now.